Hello, children. This is Grandma Carla with the start of Freddy Goes Camping. Remember, we read Freddy Goes to Florida a while back, and this is by Walter R. Brooks, and it was written and published in 1948, which was before I was ever born. So you know it's a very old book. The Pigpen on the bean farm stood a little above the pig barnyard. On the door was a small brass plate which said, Frederick Bean, Esquire. Above the door was a sign, Frederick and Wiggins, Detectives. Office hours, Wednesdays, 2 to 4 p.m. To the left of the door was another sign, subscriptions taken here for the Bean Home News, the animal's own newspaper. Here's a picture of Freddy in his role as an editor of the newspaper. Doesn't he look like a serious fellow? This was the outside of the pig pen. Inside, sitting in his broken down old armchair before his desk, was Freddy. Freddy the pig, editor, poet, banker, detective. Today, being Thursday, he was Freddy the editor, and he was getting the material in shape for the next issue of the paper. He had almost enough now. There was just one blank space left to fill. A small poem would just fit it. So he leaned on his left elbow and put his left front trotter to his brow, and thus he became Freddy the Poet, waiting for inspiration. So he waited. Every now and then, he would lick his pencil. He had licked it so often that there was a black line right around his mouth. But there still wasn't a black mark on the blank leaf of his notebook where the poem was supposed to be. And there was a knock at the door. Rats, said Freddy, and then he called impatiently, Come in! The door flew open, and a short, red-faced man with rather loud clothes and a bristly mustache came in. Mr. Camphor, Freddy exclaimed. Jimson to you, my boy, always, he said the man. They shook hands, and Freddy said, Well, Mr. Jimson, do sit down. It's pretty nice of you to come see me. Of course, if I'd known you were coming, I'd have tidied up a bit. Hate to have to see the place such a mess. Mr. Camphor glanced around. Papers were piled on the desk and overflowed onto the bed. Freddy hadn't had time to make his bed or clear away his breakfast dishes, and the only other chair in the room was heaped nearly as high as the desk. I'd have had to give you about 3 days' notice, I guess, Mr. Camphor said with a laugh, and I wouldn't want you to go to all that trouble on my account. Anyhow, I can't stop. Got to get back to see what Aunt Minerva is up to. I didn't know you had an aunt, Freddy said. Goodness, everybody has aunts. I've got 2. I've made quite a study of ants. There are 2 kinds. There's the regular kind, and then there's the other kind. Mine are the other kind. You'll see when you meet them. Meet them? Said Freddy. They're here? Oh, no. See here, Freddy. Mr. Camphor sat down on the edge of the bed. I need your help. I want you to... He stopped. No. Better not tell you till you've seen them. See here. Can't you bring your partner and come up for a few days? Look the ground over? See what can be done? You've been promising to pay me a visit for a year. How about it? Why, I could, said Freddy. Sure, we'll come. But what is it that you want me to do? I'll tell you what, said Mr. Camphor, getting up. But there's no time to tell you why. I want you to get rid of my aunts. Good gracious, said Freddy. You mean, Oh, no, not kidnap them or push them in the lake or anything, said Mr. Camphor with a laugh. Get them to leave, that's all. Ha, think it over, and I'll expect you and Mrs. Wiggins tomorrow, eh? He had gone before Freddy could ask another question. Freddy hurried after him. At least he tried to. But the springs of his old chair were broken so that he was sitting almost on the floor, and he had to be especially careful because the ends of some of them stuck through the upholstery. If you moved too quickly, they jabbed you. By the time Freddy got outside, Mr. Camphor's car was rolling out of the bean gate. Freddy realized that his guest had been pretty smart. He told me just enough to make me want to know more. He thought, he knows that's the way to get us up there. But he would have been glad to go in any case, for he had been the caretaker last summer on Mr. Camphor's big estate, and they had become fast friends. Sitting on the roof of the pig pen was Mr. J.J. Pomeroy. Mr. Pomeroy was a robin, and he was the messenger who would fly Freddy's manuscript down to the printing office in Centerboro when Freddy had it ready. He was hopping up and down with impatience. "For goodness sake, Freddy," he said, "hurry up. I want to get back home before dark. You know I don't like night flying since I've been wearing glasses." Mr. Pomeroy was very nearsighted and had had a lot of trouble until Freddy had taken him to an optician and had a little pair of spectacles made for him. "Oh, do shut up," said Freddy crossly. "If I could think of something I was interested enough to write about, I'd be through in—" "What are you interested in, J.J.?" he asked, looking up at the robin. Mr. Pomeroy lifted a claw and took off his glasses and polished them on his wing. "Why, let me see," he said. "My wife and family, of course. After that, why, I guess I'd have to say worms." "Worms?" thought Freddy. "I've never seen a poem about worms. Not much to say about them, as far as I can see." "That's where you're wrong," said the robin. "Worms are one of the first subjects we robins teach our children about. Why, worms, my dear sir, are the stuff of life. Do you realize that there are more than 2,000 edible varieties in the United States alone?" "Ugh, that's an awful thought," said Freddy with a shudder. "An incredible thought. Hey, wait a minute." He ran in and brought out his notebook. "Of course," Mr. Pomeroy went on, "some kinds are better than others, if you know what I mean." "You mean worse instead of better, don't you?" Freddy looked up from what he was writing. "Not at all. Better. Deliciouser. And for my money, one of those small light green inchworms. What you call a measuring worm, you know the kind. He has some feet in front, and then for quite a long distance he is just worm, and then at the back end there are some more feet. So when he walks, he stretches out and he puts down his front feet, and then he brings up his back feet close to them so that his body makes a kind of loop. Very handy to pick them up by. They're really very tasty, Freddy. So crisp and tender. Let me find you one, and you just try it once, will you?" "Not for $1,000,000, said Freddy. "It makes my stomach flutter just to think of it. Listen, J.J., how's this?" But before he could start to read, Jinx the cat came running up. "Hi, Pig, how's the old inspiration this morning? Hitting on all six?" "Go away," said Freddy. "I'm busy." "What's that black lipstick you've got on? Some new fashion you're starting?" Jinx asked. "Hey," he said, "don't throw anything. I just came over to tell you there's a chipmunk here to see you. Got a message for you. He won't tell us what it is. He's over at the barn." "Well, I can't come now," said Freddy. "Tell him to wait. I'll be over in a little." "Okay, I'll tell him you'll be over when you get your makeup on," said Jinx as he sauntered off. "Smart aleck," Freddy growled. "Well now, listen, J.J." And he read, "To say that worms are edible will seem to you incredible. For you to eat a measuring worm would take more courage and determination than to take a dive into a clump of poison ivy. Yet robins eat them every day. They smack their beaks and shout hooray. They gobble them up with joy and pride and do not seem upset inside." "It doesn't get anywhere," said the robin. "No," said the pig. "That's true. There's no moral. Unless," he wrote again for a minute, "how's this? The moral here is plain to see. What pleases you does not please me. What pleases me to you is hateful. And for this fact we should be great." "Look, Freddy," Mr. Pomeroy interrupted, "you want me to be quite frank, don't you?" "Of course, said Freddy. Of course, my dear chap. An honest opinion is worth more than all the flattery in the world. Okay, then, said Mr. Pomeroy. I think it's just plain dull. Everybody knows that if we all liked the same thing, there wouldn't be enough to go around. Now, when people say they want an honest opinion about something they've done, they probably mean it all right, but if it isn't a favorable opinion, they're apt to get mad. So what? Said Freddy crossly. You're so smart, suppose you write it. Why not? Said Mr. Pomeroy. He thought a moment, and then he said, to say that worms are edible may seem to you incredible, and yet I most emphatically assert that hardly any dishes are more filling or deliciouser than angleworms pulled freshly from the dirt. Said the pig. Not bad. Not bad at all, for a first effort. You might sign your name to it. How would you go on from there? Well, I'd go on to the other kinds, plan a well-balanced meal, you see. Beetles, flies, and then maybe go into caterpillars. No, Freddy said. No, our readers aren't squeamish, specially, but I doubt if they'd care for a description of a complete bug dinner. Tell you what I'll do, JJ, I'll print that verse and take up the rest of the space with a little note. With the following deft and original verse, our esteemed fellow citizen, Mr. J.J. Pomeroy, makes his debut as a full-fledged poet in this issue, possessing a degree of technical skill unusual in a beginner, and so on and so on. How about that? Mr. Pomeroy was delighted, and as soon as Freddy had written it out, he took the paper and flew off to Cinnaborough. Freddy was pleased too. His own verses, he knew, weren't much good. My goodness, people would say when they read them, Freddy is slipping. Of course, the robins weren't very good either, but nobody would criticize Freddy for them. When Freddy got over to the barn, the chipmunk was gone. He's kind of an impatient guy, Jinx said. Fidgeted around and got cranky when you didn't show up. Said he couldn't wait all day, but he left a message for you. I don't know whether you'll want to do anything about it or not. I don't either, unless you tell me what it is, said Freddy. I am telling you. This chipmunk lives on Macy's farm down on the flats. Says he's got some information about Simon and his gang. Simon, eh? Said Freddy thoughtfully. Old Simon was the head of a large family of thieving rats who had given the bean animals a good deal of trouble in the past. Freddy's last fight with them had been when he had driven them out of Mr. Camphor's attic the summer before. Since then, he had heard nothing of them. He shook his head. I'm not interested in Simon. As long as he's not bothering me, I'm not going to bother him. Where is he living? Over at Macy's? Search me, chum, said the cat. I'm just telling you what the guy said. You going over to see him? When Freddy said no, Jinx said, okay, maybe I'll gallop over there myself this afternoon. He said he wanted $1 for his information, but I guess if I give him a touch of the old third degree, he'll sing without getting paid for it. Things are kind of dull around here. I wouldn't mind a little rat hunting. So long, old kid. That is the end of chapter 1. So let's look at our pictures. I already showed you Freddy trying to get his poem together. There. And then we have a picture here of Freddy talking to Jinx the cat. And up on the roof is the robin, J.J. Pomeroy. And the cat is Jinx. And the pig and the cat are talking. And that is the end of the chapter. And this is Grandma Carla. And I love you.